I don't remember the exact moment I realized my dad didn't love us anymore. People think it happens suddenly, like a slap to the face or a door slammed in anger. But for me, it was slow. Like watching the paint peel off a wall year after year until one day you look up and realize the whole thing is bare. I was 12 when everything finally collapsed. We lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind where people say, "Good morning," even if they don't like you, and the grocery store cashier knows exactly how much milk your family buys each week. Our house was old, creaking in places, but it was home, at least to my mom and me, to my dad. I don't know. I think he always wanted something bigger, something louder, something that didn't involve responsibility. His name was David. Just Dad back then. But even that word feels foreign to me now. He used to be a decent man. At least that's what my mom said when she wanted to comfort me. He had a job at a construction company, steady enough, and he used to come home with dust in his hair and a tired smile on his face. For a few years, things were okay. But then he discovered gambling. Not casinos, those were too far, but online betting and weekly poker nights with men who didn't care if he showed up sober or not. After that, he discovered alcohol. Or maybe it discovered him. Either way, it became his best friend. He started coming home later. Then he started yelling. Then he stopped coming home at all some nights. Then came the debts. The worst part wasn't the shouting or the money problems. It was how he looked at us. Like we were the reason he was drowning. I remember one particular evening better than any other. It was early winter, one of those raw, windy nights when the cold creeps into your bones, even when you're standing inside. Mom had made chicken soup, the cheap kind with more water than flavor, but it was warm, and it was something. Dad stumbled through the door around 10 p.m., smelling like whiskey and cigarettes. Mom didn't even flinch anymore. She just set her spoon down quietly. "Where were you?" she asked, voice soft but steady. He ignored her completely, throwing his jacket onto the floor and kicking off his boots. Then his eyes found me. "What are you staring at?" he snapped. I looked down at my bowl. "Nothing." "Damn right it's nothing," he muttered. "Everything in this house is nothing." He always said things like that. I used to think he didn't mean them. Kids have a way of convincing themselves their parents are better people than they actually are. But that night felt different. Mom reached for his arm gently. "David, we need to talk about the mortgage." He jerked away from her so hard she almost fell. "Your problem, not mine." "It's our house," she whispered. His laugh was ugly. "Mean. You and that kid are holding me back. I could have had a better life. A real life." That line. That exact line. It carved itself into my brain like a scar. Mom blinked fast, trying not to cry. He didn't care. He pushed past us, grabbed a half-empty bottle from the counter, and paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "You think I want to stay stuck here forever?" he shouted. "You think I want to keep paying for everything while you drag me down?" Mom's voice cracked. "David, please." "No, I'm done. I'm so damn done with this." Then he stormed out. I thought he would come back like he always did, usually by morning, sometimes by the next night, but he always returned, even if it was just to yell or sleep or grab more money. But not this time. 3 days passed. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Mom tried contacting some of his friends. One of them, Mark, a guy with a stomach that entered the room before he did finally answered. "Oh, Dave? Yeah, he left town. Didn't tell you?" He sounded half drunk and fully uninterested. Mom looked like someone had unplugged her from the wall. Every bit of energy drained straight out of her. I didn't understand fully at 12, but I understood enough. He wasn't coming back. The next week is a blur in my memory, a mess of bills, letters, and men in uniforms who showed up at our door. I overheard things I shouldn't have. Defaulted loan, car repossession, mortgage delinquent, garnished wages. The more I heard, the more sick I felt. Our house? Gone. Savings? Gone. Mom's credit? Destroyed. All because of him. I asked her once, a few months later, why she didn't tell me everything immediately. She just said, "You were a kid, Emily. I wanted to give you at least a little more time to feel safe." But I didn't feel safe. Not then. Not for a long time. The night we moved out is something I'll never forget. Mom let me pack 2 boxes. Just 2. I cried because I wanted to take my books, my stuffed animals, my posters, everything. But she explained gently that we didn't have room, or money for storage, or time. She tried to be strong, but when she folded one of Dad's old shirts to throw away, her hands trembled. We loaded everything into our beat-up car. The backseat was stuffed with our whole lives squeezed into cardboard. As we drove away from the house, I turned back to look at it through the window. The porch light was still on. Dad always left it on when he went out drinking, saying it helped him find his way back. It stayed on long after he chose not to come back at all. Our new place was a one-bedroom apartment near a highway, the kind where you could hear trucks pass at all hours. The walls were thin and smelled like mildew. The carpet had stains that looked like they'd been there since the 80 seconds. Mom slept on a pull-out couch. I took the bedroom, even though I begged her to take it instead. "It's fine, sweetheart," she said over and over. "You need your rest for school." But I could hear her crying almost every night through the walls. I think that was the moment something changed in me. Kids grow up fast when life forces them to. I promised myself quietly, silently, that I would never rely on anyone the way my mom relied on him. I would never be powerless. I would never let someone destroy my life the way my father destroyed ours. And I would never forgive him. Not then. Not ever. At 12, I didn't know who I wanted to be, but I knew who I didn't want to become. I hated him. I hated every memory of him. I hated the way he made my mom look like she was made of broken glass. But hate was fuel. I went to school like a ghost for a while, quiet, exhausted, embarrassed. But then something shifted. I started studying harder, staying after class for help, volunteering for extra credit, getting straight A's. My mom noticed. She asked me one night, "Why are you working so hard, honey?" I told her, "Because I'm not going to end up like him." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. People love to say children are resilient. But that's not the truth. We don't bounce back. We reshape ourselves around the damage. The night my dad abandoned us wasn't just the night my family fell apart. It was the night I started building a new version of myself. A version that would never depend on anyone else. A version that would survive no matter how hard life got. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of everything. The pain, the growth, the future, and eventually, the revenge. The morning after everything broke felt wrong. Not loud, not chaotic, just wrong in that quiet, suffocating way where the world keeps moving like nothing happened, but inside your chest everything is upside down. I woke up to sunlight creeping through the blinds and the kind of stillness that makes you question if last night even happened. But it did. God, it did. Mom crying in the hallway. Dad screaming on the porch. The shattered photo frame. The words you can't take back once they've escaped. Everything was real. And the weirdest part? The house felt lighter without him there. I knocked on her door 3 times. "Mom, you hungry?" Silence. Then a soft, exhausted voice. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Go to school." But she wasn't okay. Even at 11, I knew that. She didn't come out to pack my lunch. Didn't braid my hair. Didn't do that little forehead kiss she always did before I left. It was like she was trying to shrink into herself, hide in the one place he hadn't touched. And something inside me hardened at the sight. I hated him. For making her small. For making me scared. For breaking our home from the inside out. At school, I pretended everything was normal. "What's wrong with your face?" "Didn't sleep?" "You look weird today." "You okay?" I lied to all of them. "Just tired." "Got a headache." "Didn't finish homework." Kids don't know how to ask the right questions. And even if they did, I wouldn't have known how to answer them. But teachers always know. My science teacher, Miss Dalton, pulled me aside after class. "You seem distracted today," she said gently. I shrugged. "I'm fine." The way adults say "I'm fine" is different from kids. For kids, it's a shield. For adults, it's a warning. But she didn't push. She just handed me a granola bar and said, "Come to me if you ever need a quiet space." I didn't know it then, but that small kindness was the first time in my life I understood that family didn't just mean blood. The sun was setting when I heard it. Heavy stumbling footsteps outside the house. Mom was still in her room. The kitchen lights were off. The whole house smelled like quiet and dread. Fists hitting the front door. Not knocking. Demanding. "Open the damn door!" It was him. Of course it was him. I froze halfway down the hallway. I didn't know what to do. My heart was pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it through the door. He kept shouting, "I live here. Open up. You think you can shut me out? This is my house." No, it wasn't. It had never been. The house belonged to the person who kept it warm, who cooked meals, who remembered birthdays, who held everything together when he tore it apart. But he didn't understand that kind of responsibility. He only understood ownership. Her bedroom door opened slowly, and she stepped out looking like she had aged 5 years in one day. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Go to your room, Mom." Now, so I did. But I didn't close the door fully, just enough to hear without being seen. She walked to the front door, her steps soft but firm, and said, "You need to leave." "No," he growled. "You don't get to kick me out." "I'm not kicking you out," she said. "You left." Those 3 words cracked the air like lightning. Then everything went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would soften. Maybe he would finally hear her. But then, he spit out the sentence that burned itself into my memory for years. "You and that kid ruined my life." That kid. Not our kid. Not my daughter. Just that kid. Like I was some burden he'd been forced to carry. That was the moment he lost me forever. Not as a father, but as a person. His footsteps thundered down the porch. The engine of his truck roared to life. Then the gravel sprayed as he tore out of the driveway. I peeked through my cracked door and saw Mom sliding down the wall, covering her face with both hands. But she wasn't crying. She was breathing. Long, deep breaths. For the first time in years, she could finally breathe. I didn't know what the future would be like without him. I didn't know how we'd pay bills, or what people would say, or if things would ever feel normal again. But I knew this. The night everything broke was also the night everything began. Because breakage doesn't just ruin. Sometimes it frees. The first week after he left for good was a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief, because the yelling and the looming threat of his presence were gone. Fear, because the world suddenly seemed bigger, emptier, and completely ours to handle. Mom didn't sleep much, and I didn't either. We went through the house, room by room, salvaging what little we could take from the wreckage he left behind. Broken appliances, unpaid bills, and piles of unopened letters that screamed warnings at us like ghosts. Without him, the house felt alive in a different way. I could hear the creak of the floorboards without flinching. I could hear Mom humming softly in the kitchen. I could hear myself breathing and know I was safe. But it also felt strange, almost wrong, to live in a space that had once belonged to someone who abandoned us. Everything he touched felt poisoned. His scent, his mess, even his chair, like the memories were embedded in the furniture itself. While sorting the kitchen drawers, I found a stack of unopened letters. They weren't addressed to Mom, they were all for him. Debt notices, eviction threats, letters from people who wanted money he didn't have. I realized then that he wasn't just abandoning us emotionally, he was abandoning us financially too. And in his absence, the weight of responsibility fell squarely on Mom and now me. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, sifting through them, feeling both anger and pity. Anger at what he had done, pity because clearly he had dug a hole he couldn't get out of. Mom didn't let any of this break her. She signed up for overtime shifts at the diner. She worked extra shifts cleaning houses, and she still managed to make us feel normal. I remember her saying one evening as she carried a bag of groceries in, exhausted, "We'll be okay. We always are, even if he's gone." Her voice didn't sound convincing. Not really. But somehow it was enough for me. About 10 days later, a neighbor, Mr. Lawson, the retired mailman, knocked on our door. He had always been kind, the kind of person who remembers birthdays and names, even if he doesn't have to. He had a stack of letters and a grave expression. "They were for your father," he said. "Some of them came from the town over. Business stuff. I didn't know you were still living here. Thought you should see them." Among them were receipts, bank statements, and a small notebook. At first, I didn't understand. Then I realized he had another life, a completely separate one. He'd been lying for years, building a parallel world where he gambled, drank, and borrowed money he couldn't repay. We weren't even on his radar, except as collateral, obstacles, or obligations to avoid. And for the first time, I understood fully how little he cared. It was a cold Friday evening when I sat alone in the living room, sifting through the letters and bills, trying to make sense of what I'd found. I could feel my heart harden with every receipt, every demand for money, every note showing he had abandoned us completely. Not because he was sick, not because he was struggling, because he chose to leave, because he didn't care. And that's when it clicked. I didn't want revenge in the petty sense. I didn't want to humiliate him in front of neighbors or friends. I wanted justice. Delayed, yes, but precise, inevitable justice. I made a quiet promise, sitting on that threadbare couch that had once held his weight and his lies. If he ever comes back, if he ever asks for help, I will not give him what he expects. I will not let him walk into my life and pretend he's allowed back. I will help him, but on my terms. I will make him confront every choice he made. I will make him face the consequences he ignored for decades. And in that moment, I felt powerful for the first time since I was 12. Because while he had abandoned us, he had also taught me something: the value of strength, self-reliance, and the cold clarity of seeing someone for who they truly are. It happened on a Tuesday. I was at my apartment, half-finished report on my laptop, coffee cold, mind wandering over things I didn't want to think about: bills, work, life, memories. Then there was a knock at the door. Not a soft knock. A heavy, deliberate knock. I froze. Something inside me told me to ignore it, to pretend I wasn't home. But curiosity, or perhaps some masochistic need, made me go to the door. And there he was. Older, frailer, weaker. David. My father. The man who walked out on us 20 years ago. I didn't recognize him at first. Gray hair streaked through what had once been black. Wrinkles carved deep lines into his face. Eyes sunken, tired, desperate. And yet, there was the same arrogance lurking behind the fear. He looked at me, and his voice cracked. Emily, I need you. I blinked. I wanted to slam the door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I didn't. Excuse me? I asked, carefully measured, calm. Excuse me? My own disbelief echoed in my voice. You left us, I said slowly. Do you remember that? Do you remember the years you didn't even call? He swallowed, awkward, like a child caught in a lie. I know. I know I made mistakes. But, mistakes? I interrupted. Do you call abandoning your family a mistake? 2 decades of nothing. Gone. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A decision. And now you're here, asking me to fix it? His head dropped. For the first time, humility replaced his usual arrogance. I have no one else. I need help. Please. You're the only one I can turn to. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. Mostly, I wanted to punch him. And then I realized something. He didn't come back for me. He didn't come back for my mother, who had been gone for 5 years by then. He came back because he needed something. Health, shelter, money, comfort, attention. All the things he refused to provide when he had the chance. And suddenly, the plan I had made years ago, the plan I had whispered to myself in the dark at 12, the plan that burned quietly in my chest all these years became real. Not theoretical, not distant. He was here, vulnerable, dependent. And for once, the power had shifted. Over the next few days, I let him settle in, but carefully. He had a room in my apartment, not luxurious, not large, just a space I could observe him in. I kept track of his movements, his habits, his weaknesses. I asked questions, casually. Did you eat today? Do you have medicine? Are you still in touch with anyone? He answered with the same desperation and half-truths as always. But I noticed cracks, gaps in stories, lies so thin they could barely hold up. And I remembered all the years he didn't do this for us, all the nights he didn't check if we were fed, all the mornings he didn't show up. Now, it was my turn to observe him, to make him feel the weight of absence, to let him understand in his own way what abandonment feels like. I won't lie, part of me ached. I had wanted, at some level, for him to apologize, to say he was sorry for leaving us, to acknowledge the years of pain and struggle he caused. But another part of me, maybe the larger, stronger part, knew that this was my moment. Not for vengeance in the petty sense. Not to humiliate him in front of anyone, but to exact justice in the most controlled, deliberate way possible. He needed me more than anyone. And for once, I didn't need him. That balance, his need and my independence, was intoxicating. Cold, sharp, perfect. I started small. Questions about bills, appointments, responsibilities. Requests that forced him to acknowledge his failures. Tasks that required him to confront the consequences of his choices. At first, he complied, trembling, grateful. Then, frustration set in. He resented every reminder of his inadequacy, every small task I asked him to do. He tried to charm, to beg, to manipulate. Nothing worked. And I realized this was just the beginning. The longer he stayed, the more he'd confront the truth of who he really was, and the more control I would have over the narrative. Having him in my apartment was like having a shadow from the past dangling in front of me, whispering memories I never wanted to relive. Every time he coughed, every time he asked for help, I felt the weight of years he stole from me and the power I finally held. It was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. Some nights, I'd sit on the couch and watch him sleep, frail and vulnerable. Part of me wanted to feel sorry. Part of me wanted to forgive. But another colder part of me whispered, "No, you are stronger now. You are in control. He isn't going to break you. You decide the terms this time." I realized quickly that revenge isn't about screaming or punching. It's about precision. It's about letting the person who hurt you finally face reality while you stay untouchable. And that's exactly what I planned to do. I started small. "Here's a list of your medical appointments," I said one evening. "You need to fill these out yourself." "Can't you do it?" he asked, the old arrogance creeping back. I shook my head. "You're the one who created this mess, Dad. Now you handle it." I could see the frustration building, the anxiety bubbling underneath his thin veneer of control. For once, I was watching him scramble. Then I handed him a stack of overdue bills. "Not all of them, just enough to make him uncomfortable." "Why do I have to pay this?" he said, panic rising in his voice. I smiled faintly. "You don't, but you need to understand what happens when you leave your family to rot." I made him cook dinner one night. Not because he needed food, but because he had never cooked for us when we were kids. I watched him fumble with the pots and knives, cursing under his breath. I reminded him gently, "Mom taught you how once, remember? Or did you forget everything you left behind?" He flinched. I could tell every word cut deeper than any scream I could have thrown at him. This wasn't cruelty. It was truth served cold. Every meal, every chore, every task I asked him to do reminded him of what he had abandoned. Every day I felt it. The balance shifting, just slightly. Every time he looked at me, I could see doubt in his eyes. Every time he asked for help, I reminded him silently, subtly, that he was powerless. And for the first time, I wasn't powerless. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't humiliate him publicly. I let the weight of reality do it for me. One evening, he sat in the living room, staring blankly at a pile of paperwork. I sat across from him, sipping my tea. "Why did you leave us?" I asked quietly. He flinched, avoided my gaze, then muttered, I didn't know how to... I thought I needed freedom." "Freedom?" I echoed. "From us? From your family? From your responsibilities?" He said nothing. I let the silence linger. Long enough for him to feel every empty year, every missed birthday, every Christmas we spent without him. And in that silence, I knew. He finally understood. The justice wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was simply the truth hitting him, one day at a time. Over the next few weeks, I continued to give him tasks, responsibilities he never wanted as a parent, as a man, as a provider, scheduling appointments, filling out forms, even simple things like laundry and grocery lists. Each time, I watched his pride crumble. Each time, I felt a small sense of victory. Not revenge in the petty sense, but the long-awaited justice of balance restored. He needed me more than anyone. And for the first time, I didn't need him. By the time a month had passed, I had him exactly where I wanted. Not humiliated, not publicly shamed, not broken in body, but broken in control. And that, for him, was worse than anything I could have done with my fists. I started with the debts. Carefully, meticulously, I made him sit down and go through everything he owed. Not to pay it, but to confront it. Every missed payment, every loan you defaulted on, every contract you ignored, this is your responsibility, I told him calmly. I handed him statements, letters, and notices. He flinched at every page. I didn't know, he muttered. You did know, I said softly. You chose to ignore it, and now it's yours to face. I watched him squirm under the weight of decades of irresponsibility. For the first time in his life, someone wasn't bailing him out. I didn't baby him. I didn't let him sit idle. Cooking, cleaning, organizing. Tasks he had ignored as a father, as a man, as a husband. Every day, he stumbled over chores that seemed trivial to anyone else, but were a revelation for him. I let him fail. I let him get frustrated. I let him realize what it means to be powerless. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply asked him questions. How do you feel now, Dad? Do you realize what you took from us? Do you know the years we spent without you? And I let the silence do the work. Every pause, every hesitation, every tiny glance he couldn't meet. That was my revenge. He had taught me that absence can hurt more than words ever could. So I returned the favor. One evening, after he had been doing chores all day, I handed him the stack of letters I had found in the first week he came back. These are the letters you never opened. The bills you ignored. The threats you dismissed. The life you abandoned. He looked at them, eyes wide, realization dawning. You didn't care about us, I said, voice low. No, not then, not now, but I'm here, so face it. And he did. Every lie, every avoidance, every selfish act, it hit him like a freight train. And for once, there was no one to protect him. No one to forgive him. No one to cover for him. I didn't let him leave. Not yet. Every morning, I asked him questions about the past. Every night, I let him see what life had become without him. I reminded him that he had lost our love, our trust, our years. He couldn't charm me anymore. He couldn't manipulate me. He couldn't hide from the consequences he created. And that, finally, was the sweetest part. One night, sitting across from him at the dinner table, I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You wanted a second chance, Dad. Here it is. You're here. You're alive. You're facing the consequences. This is your life now." He nodded slowly, lips pressed tight, finally understanding what he had done. He couldn't take it back. He couldn't rewrite history. And he couldn't escape me. That night, I realized something. Revenge isn't about violence. It's about balance. It's about making the person who hurt you confront the reality of their choices while you remain untouchable. And in that moment, after 20 years of absence, lies, and pain, I felt free. After weeks of calculated pressure, careful observation, and letting him face the consequences of his own choices, the dynamic had shifted completely. He was no longer the man who walked out 20 years ago. He was a shadow of himself. A man who realized too late the cost of his selfishness. And I was no longer the scared kid hiding behind Mom's skirt. I was in control. Strong. Unshakable. One evening, I asked him to sit down across from me in the living room. "Do you understand what you lost?" I asked quietly. He nodded, eyes downcast. I do," he murmured. "Do you understand why I can't forgive you?" His silence was enough. "Good," I said, "because forgiveness isn't mine to give. You get to live with this. Every choice, every abandonment, every moment you were gone, it's yours now." He looked at me, something raw and broken in his eyes. And I realized he finally understood. Not just intellectually, but deeply, painfully. I helped him pack a small bag. He wasn't going to stay forever. Not that I would have allowed it. As he stood at the door, I said one last thing. "Take care of yourself. That's all I ask." No hugs. No tears. No apologies from him, because they didn't matter anymore. I closed the door behind him and felt a weight lift. For the first time in decades, the apartment felt like mine. Like ours, Mom and me, our quiet life rebuilt without the shadow of abandonment hovering over it. I spent that night on the couch, looking at the ceiling, thinking about all the years he had taken from us. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. Revenge wasn't about hurting him physically. It wasn't about shame or anger or screaming matches. It was about teaching him the hardest lesson, that choices have consequences. That absence leaves scars. And that love cannot be demanded, it can only be given, and only when it's wanted. By letting him live with the reality of what he lost, I had taken back control of my life. And in doing so, I finally took back myself. Weeks turned into months. Mom and I rebuilt our routines. We laughed again. Slowly, we healed piece by piece. I never reached out to him again. I didn't need closure from him. I had found it myself. And for the first time in my life, I realized the past doesn't define you. Your choices now do. And I chose freedom.